Strike Zone, as I am Joe Hunk. Obviously, you listen and hear me every single day on 3HL, but now during baseball season, every Thursday night, we will break down and talk about Major League Baseball, minor league baseball, college baseball, and yes, even at the TSSAA baseball, if you want to get into that as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Hunk. And of course, shoot those questions in. We've got the chat getting going as we speak right now. So make sure that you get that chat going. You can interact and have some fun with each other, have a conversation between everybody that's in the chat, or you can shoot us a question for something that we're going to be talking about just a little bit later on from right now. Now, coming up in just a little bit, we are actually going to be joined by a special guest, and his name is Dustin Bledsoe. Dustin is an agent for baseball players that are based here in the Nashville area. The players don't have to be based here, but he is based here. And so it is really interesting. And I want you guys, as you're watching and as you're listening to the Strike Zone, wherever it is, whether it's on the podcast, whether it's on Zone TV, I want you to kind of see and hear what is kind of involved when it does come with the process of being an agent and even being a baseball player, because it's very different when you're talking about being a professional baseball player and getting an agent, because even when you're drafted, whether it's out of high school, whether it's out of college, you're still going to go through the minor league system. It may be for a week. There have been pitchers that have only spent a very short time in the minor league system before getting brought up to the major leagues. Go back and look at the 2015 World Series. And you will see players like that will make that jump. But at some point in time, you're going to be here, or you are going to be in a AA ballpark, whether it's in the Southern League, whether you're out in Texas, wherever it is, you are going to be playing in a ballpark that is half full and is going to be in front of a bunch of people that are judging every single little move you're making to determine if you deserve to go to the next level, whatever that is, high A to AA, AA to AAA to the major leagues. Everybody that's stepping on this field is going to want to go to Milwaukee, or if they're an opposing team, wherever their parent franchise is, they're going to want to go there. That's why they're playing the game. So talking to an agent and seeing how the whole process works, I think is going to be extremely interesting. So Dustin's going to be joining us here in just a little bit on the Strike Zone. Now, the team right now is actually in Jacksonville. They are taking on the Jumbo Shrimp. If that sounds weird, if you're a minor league fanatic, remember, the Jumbo Shrimp used to be a AA franchise. In fact, they were in the Southern League. They were the Miami Marlins AA team. And then during this whole rearranging of minor league baseball franchises and minor league teams, Miami bumped Jacksonville up from AA to AAA. Let's be honest. I have no clue as to why the Jacksonville, Florida area had a AA baseball team instead of a AAA. Like that's always been weird to me. Because you could either go to like Pearl, Mississippi, which is where the Mississippi Braves are. You can go to Kodak, which is where the Smokies are. You can go at one time Jackson to take on the Generals. You can go to Montgomery, Birmingham, Huntsville, and then Jacksonville. It never fit. So they are down in Jacksonville taking on the Jumbo Shrimp this week, but they're going to be back in town next week, starting on Tuesday. And I bring up Tuesday because starting on Tuesday, you're going to have some events that you're going to want to be at the ballpark for, specifically before we're back out here on Thursday night during the game with the Louisville Bats, which is the series that is coming up for the Nashville Sounds on Tuesday night. Tuesday night is when you bring your dogs, man. Get your dogs, bring them. It's not going to be extremely hot. It's not like it's a day game. You're going to get that dusk sunset that looks so beautiful over First Horizon Park. You're going to be able to hang out, bring your dogs, have a little bit of fun. There's going to be bowls of water and stuff all the way around. It's going to be $30 to get in, $25 for the owners, $5 for the dogs. Okay. What's really cool about what the Sounds are going to be doing is it's not like they are going to be taking this money and it's going towards their final count. The actual dog tickets are going to be benefiting a local nonprofit organization. So that's going to be the really cool thing about coming out on Tuesday night if you're coming out here to First Horizon Park. Now, Wednesday, Wednesday is the kicker, okay? Wednesday is the one you need to pay attention to for a few reasons, all right? Not only is it going to be winning Wednesday, okay? They're going to have some opportunities for you to win a lot of things out here, but beforehand, 3HL is going to be broadcasting from First Horizon Park, getting you ready for the game with the Bats. The other thing is going to be happening right down there. Ron Slay, Mr. I'm in the building, is going to be on that mound, and he's going to be throwing out a first pitch. Do not forget how much crap he gave Ramon Foster last year when it was Ramon's turn to throw out the first pitch. All right? So let's see if Slay can do a little bit better coming up on Wednesday night next week. That's May 18th. The other thing that's going to be really cool about that Wednesday night baseball game against the Bats is, yes, 3HL is going to be here. Ron Slay is going to be throwing out the first pitch. Heck, we're giving away tickets on 104.5 for you to be here. So make sure that you're listening and watching on 104.5 The Zone TV. But if you are one of the first 1,000 fans through the gate on Wednesday, you get a Mookie Betts jersey. Okay, it's a jersey is what it is. It's your t-shirt. It's like the Dansby Swanson one. It's like the R.A. Dickey one that they did a few weeks ago. But this one's going to be for Mookie Betts. What's really cool about this is it's not going to be college oriented like Dansby's was and like R.A. Dickey's was. This one is from Overton. So this is going to be his high school jersey that you're going to be getting if you are one of the first 1,000 fans through the gate next Wednesday night here at First Horizon Park. And then Thursday is when we're going to be back out here. I don't know where we're going to be. Today, as you can see behind me, I'm in a suite. The guys have hooked me up with a suite. I appreciate the suite deeply. We're in a suite tonight. Heck, next Thursday, we could be out in the bandbox. We could be back over on one of the terraces. I could be right there underneath the guitar. I don't really know where I'm going to be. Honestly, they just tell me when I get here, and I look at them and I say, hey, man, where are you guys having me set up tonight? And they're like, I think you should go this way. Cool. Let's have some fun with it. So we're going to be back out for Thursday night. Show is going to be back at 7 o'clock. The only reason it was at 8 o'clock tonight just has to do with the fact that it's NFL schedule drop day, and we have a lot of stuff that we're doing with Titans Radio. So we backed up the Strike Zone podcast just a little bit. No big deal. All right. But Thursday, Throwback Thursdays. The Sounds are rocking their 78 unis like they always do. What's really cool, though, and I know you have them, I know that I have them, it is Teacher Appreciation Night so that people can say thank you to all of the educators throughout Central Tennessee, okay? I know I had the ones that affected my life and helped my life, affected my life in bad ways, good ways, but they all meant the good same because they were all trying to get me in the right direction. I don't know if any of them feel like they've been successful, but I appreciate you, and I really do. So thank you so much for doing that, and I appreciate every one of the teachers that. So it's going to be Teacher Appreciation Night when you come out to the ballpark next Thursday night. Now, let's go ahead, get to our guest. He's waiting for us right now. Dustin Bledsoe is a baseball agent. His company, the Bledsoe Agency, is based out of Nashville in Brentwood. He's been nice enough. He's going to join us. We're going to talk to him about the entire process that is being a baseball agent and how it's kind of different from being agents for everywhere else. And we're joined right now by Dustin Bledsoe of the Bledsoe Agency. As a matter of fact, it's based here in Nashville, in Brentwood. And Dustin, man, first off, I appreciate you coming on with us. But the second thing that I want to say is that to find out that not only we have an agency here in Nashville is extremely fascinating to me, but the market that you've kind of cornered is really special in that. And the fact, why did you choose, for people that don't know, you just represent baseball players? Sure. Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. Yeah, great to spend time, and I appreciate the kind words for sure. So, I think, obviously from my end, and my brother Hunter is my partner. We've been doing it almost 20 years, and my brother played at Vanderbilt, and then he played professionally for several years out in a few of the different farm systems around baseball. So he's a Nashville guy. We're Tennessee natives. We were born and raised in the Tri-Cities area of the state of Tennessee. I went to the University of Tennessee for law school. And so, Tennessee has always been home in some
shape or form, but Nashville being, such a great sports town, entertainment town, it made sense, obviously, as far as when we were starting our business, to create the foundation here, just with a lot of the different relationships we were able to build. Baseball being, more of a passion for us, personally as a family growing up. But then also, I think when we started our business, there was opportunity where, if you weren't a huge established, kind of corporate conglomerate of an agency, you still had a chance to get your foot in the door, because there's still an element to the baseball world that is grassroots, right? Where, you're finding somebody who's young, that's maybe 16, 17 years old, is a ways away from stardom, for lack of a better term, and that you can build that relationship with they and their family about how you can add value, and then ultimately, step beside them along that journey to hopefully get them to a point where not only they're in the big leagues, but have a long, successful big league career. So,
and you said
that was just really more of anything, just an opportunity to do something that we felt like could be successful in the long term when we were starting out, where we were two, young guys just looking to get our foot in the door.
Well, and that's where I was really curious about the getting your foot in the door thing, because you went to Clemson for college first. What do you study to become an agent? Because you mentioned going to Tennessee for law school, but how does it start for somebody that would want to go down the path of saying, you know what, I want to be an agent?
Yeah, great question. I guess the best way I know to answer that is I'm somewhat of a product of knowing what I didn't want to do as much as what I wanted to do. I don't think there's one specific field of study that you can say, hey, that's going to allow you to be an agent. I was an economics undergraduate. I was interested in business, and I was interested in different forms of business. Did some clerkships up in New York in investment banking in Manhattan. Worked up on Capitol Hill in economic policy there for a large think tank. Did some different things like that. And so that kind of was all really amazing experiences, but didn't necessarily set my world on fire from a passion standpoint. And then when I got back to law school, I started clerking for an agency that was, had multiple offices across the country. They did entertainment. They did the NFL, the NBA, some different things like that. And that whet my appetite for what was, ultimately my interest in the agency side of it. And then I think a combination of both business and legal understanding, and just the skill sets that those different, experiences and those different studies gave me, as well as working for that agency. And then my brother, obviously had the playing experience. And so, we had a lot of conversations through his time playing about just things that he saw that he felt like could be better, things that he thought were really good about, representation, et cetera. And then I think as much as anything, it was enough of an interest and a passion and maybe just enough knowledge to be dangerous to say, hey, why don't we try this? And that was ultimately what led us to it. So I don't know that there's one specific thing, as much as I always say that I don't know that I was the world's best law student, but I knew enough to know what I didn't know, and knew enough to know what I did know. And I felt like starting my own business, whether it succeeded or failed, was a better quote unquote resume builder than just going out and just getting accustomed to making a little bit of a salary or whatever. And then, ultimately getting comfortable. It's at least I would try and fail and know whether it would work or not. And fortunately for us, we've caught some breaks and made some breaks, and, here we are almost 20 years later. So.
And you mentioned the conversations that you had with your brother and some of the things that during his playing career that you were could be better. What were some things that he was looking at that he thought, look, this really needs to change? Yeah.
So I think two things is one, I think, and certainly in the baseball world, this holds true. And that's where my, perspective is it's a really hard business model, right? Because it's such a long lead time, right? To not only to gain a client, but then ultimately decide, go alongside them for such a long period of time before they ultimately if they ever get to the major leagues, and then they become someone who gets to arbitration or gets to free agency, and contractually they then are at a point where economically they're secure and they're, fee payers for an agent and so on and so forth, that you have to be really desirous of relationally being invested both in the added value of each other, right? Of how do you add value to them? How do they add value to us? How do you build that trust? And I think for him, as he played and some of the different things that he was represented, and he had friends and teammates that were represented, it was trying to to maximize an understanding of how you build a relationship with that player about what matters. That would be the next piece of where, at least from our end, we've really doubled down is we're super involved, like for instance, in player development. We have full-time player development staff. We invest heavily in resources about helping our players, whether a lot of them have chosen to make Nashville their off-season home. They train here, they develop here under our facility, under our tutelage, under our watch. And some of them live other places, and we augment that in different ways. But I think what, most players consistently, we were always hearing it would come back to is like player development is a very hard thing in any sport and in the game of baseball, right? Farm systems and organizations, they do a lot of really good things, but at the same time, the way the system is set up, it is hard for the individual at the right moments in time to get the right information that may unlock the next step forward for them. That's the difference between them maybe being a really good AA player versus not only getting to the big leagues, but staying in the big leagues. And so what we saw was market opportunity where there was an inefficiency in the marketplace of one, people who really knew what they were doing and how to help players do it well. And then ultimately having the ability to focus on an individual or a small group of individuals and invest that energy and those resources and that knowledge into them to where whatever the upside that they could accomplish, that they were going to have their best chance of getting there. And if it didn't work out, at least you could kind of lay your head on the pillow at night, for lack of a better term, to say, man, I have gotten as much information, as much out of myself and my team of people as I possibly can. And whether I get there or I don't, at least I haven't fallen short by not knowing what I don't know. And there was a genesis of that really from like my brother's end as a player, and and then ultimately he and I in our conversations through just his time and, obviously being brothers and things like that, where, he was a really good player, right? He SEC player of the year back in the late 90s and All-American, those type of things. And then he had a nice professional career, but where he fell short maybe in his own development or his own game was things like hitting for more power. It was always like, I'm a good hitter, but I don't hit for enough power, being a corner bat or whatever. But it was always like, well, I'll train harder, maybe that'll get, but it was like never unlocking that. So it just kind of sent us on this journey of being like, well, you're one of like a whole bunch that are having that same story. And you don't really, you need more, there are answers somewhere, but you don't know where to get them. And we always looked at the agency model as kind of a flawed model in that the typical agency model is, how do I go get 10 guys, let's say, and I know 2 of them will ultimately pan out, or whatever number that is, and I'll really work for them as an agent. And what Hunter and I kind of challenged ourselves, and maybe it was just a product of like survival, I don't really know, but how do we go get the right couple from the start? And then how do we give them everything that we can from an information and a resource and an understanding of how to maximize what they are already to get to their ceiling, whatever ceiling that may be, and then see where that shakes out. And, I think the thing that we're probably most proud of is that, here we are, 18 years later or whatever. And that model has still very much held true. And fortunately, we've just been able to expand upon that ideology, but double down on that being the center of juxtaposition of how we influence and how we represent players. And it just so happened that we had not only being brothers, but we had very different skill sets. Him as a player, me more as a legal and business background. And that was a really good, collision of an ability to influence guys on the things that really matter in their career.
And let me ask, we're joined right now, Dustin Bledsoe, the Bledsoe Agency, based right here in Nashville and Brentwood. Growing up, were you a very patient kid, a very patient teenager, or were you kind of like an I want it type person when you were a kid and teenager?
Probably somewhere in the middle. I mean, I think we were we were aggressive. We kind of knew like things that we were, interested in and things we wanted to go after, and we weren't afraid to pursue them, and then, fortunately, we had opportunities and, great parents and just great opportunities to go pursue the things we were passionate about and try to make a difference.
Well, and I know I saw the look on your face when you said, "Why is he asking me that question?"
Yeah.
I saw it. And look, the reason I'm asking is because getting and becoming an agent for a baseball player is different than being an agent for an NFL player or an NBA player, because when you're drafted in the NBA, you either are going to the G League, but most likely you're going to be on the NBA roster. In the NFL, you're most likely going to be on the 56-man roster. You're going to be getting that NFL paycheck. These guys, they don't make that much money outside of the signing bonus in the very beginning. So that's the reason why I ask is you are doing something that's so different because of the fact this is about a 2 and 3 and 4 year process. This is about you guys believing in somebody for the long term and not so much that short term. And I was just wondering, like, how does somebody go about that, knowing that you're going to be, look, outside of the signing bonus, even if they are a first or second round draft pick, this is a minor league salary that they're going to be getting for the next few years.
That's right. Yeah. And so I guess, I mean, I don't know that I've ever thought about it in terms of my patience level. And, I don't think my wife would agree with that. I'm a very patient person. But I say that to say, I do think there's an element of, I think somewhat my only goals as I was kind of working towards being an agent were, I knew I was going to do it for a lot of hours on a weekly basis, right? I'm not a huge hobby person. And so it was like, I need what I do as a vocation to be a passion as well. And because it's kind of what I do. And I think my singular goals really were kind of, how do my Mondays and Fridays feel similar, right? I didn't want to live for the weekend and dread Monday morning on whatever I was doing. And however I could do that was what my goals were. And then I think when you look at what we do for a living, I think I don't think the motivation is necessarily built around the idea of like how much money do you make, or how big a contract you negotiate. Those are intangible, great benefits that come along with being successful in whatever industry someone pursues. But I think it's more about trying to actually enjoy the process. Like the idea of evaluating and identifying a young player that has a chance to be a really successful major leaguer, from a scouting evaluation, from a development evaluation, that's a real part of this that Hunter and I love. And then secondarily to that, then not only having them as a client, but you don't get very many opportunities in your career where you feel like, man, I can tangibly see kind of the house that I'm building, but you can see that with, at least in our philosophy, and hopefully what it bears out is when you watch a guy learn how to go from being more of a contact, take a Brandon Lau, right, as a client of ours. When you see him going from a really good college player with an advanced hit tool, but not necessarily a ton of power, to transitioning and mastering an art and craft of development, where now all of a sudden he's hitting 39 home runs in the big leagues, and that you have had a direct hand in that information and that deliverable and that value add. That I think that's where you do appreciate the long term of what it is and what you're trying to do, and that it is very much a marathon, not a sprint. And I think sometimes when you peel back the veil from a fandom perspective and stuff for the game of baseball, that part of it isn't always appreciated. Exactly what you said. Obviously, you have the background there, the stadium there with the sounds and these players and the little bit that they're making, but then the journey and the process of what they're trying to go. There's a real appreciation for just the effort that somebody has to pursue something that means something to them, that isn't necessarily material in nature, but is intrinsic to just who they are and what they're trying to accomplish. And to be somewhat of a small part, or hopefully a larger part in that, is maybe what it's all about, really.
Well, and Dustin joins us right now, Dustin Bledsoe, the Bledsoe Agency. And you talk about it. The one thing I love learning about the most is the genesis. Obviously, we've talked about the genesis of the agency and how you and your brother got together and wanted to do something along this. But when it does come to the client portion of this, and you've mentioned looking at somebody when they're in high school, in college, and how it's going along, from an agent standpoint, how is it that you will find a particular player or something along those lines? And I asked that because as somebody that was playing high school baseball and was being looked at by a scout for a Major League Baseball team, I had no clue of the steps or the processes. And a lot of players can kind of miss out on an opportunity because they don't know how that works. And so for you, on your end of it is, look, if you want an agent, this is how we go about finding the particular player that we like.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a multitude of ways of that, right? Some of that is you have to be good evaluators in and of itself amongst not just the two of us, but our personnel and employees that work for us, et cetera. Like there will be opportunities, whether it's at colleges or whether it's at the high school level with travel ball, events and things like that, where there's kind of a whole under circuit of different opportunities and events where you can go get eyes on players and that you have to have an idea of kind of what you're looking for from the start, right? But then it's also about relationship building, whether that's, coaches, both at the travel ball, high school, college level, whether that's professional scouts, front offices, so on and so forth. A lot of times it might be word of mouth, right? Or it might be client to client word of mouth. And I think from that end, then from a player's perspective, it's, I think ultimately it's getting involved in the, as you kind of are advancing later into like your high school career or ultimately your college career, it's getting hooked up with the right, programs and the right instructors and stuff like that to put you in events where, more likely than not, the professional community is going to be laying eyes on you to determine what they think about you as it relates to, potential opportunity at the draft level. And then, if it's at the high school level, you obviously have the consideration of whether or not you're going to sign out of high school or sign out of college or, go on to college if you're fortunate enough to be in that position at that age. And then you just really have to weigh, what that opportunity looks like, where, that's different for everybody, just depending on, what their situations are or what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So
with the agency, as far as a sports agent, or obviously in your field, particularly a baseball agent, you mentioned the development of it, the fact that you have guys that come into town and if they make their home in Nashville, then they work out here and do all of that. What was the backstory of how that got started and not just hey, I know a guy, you're going to want to fly out to LA to be working out with him and instead bringing them here?
Sure. Well, I guess one is, not to be redundant, I think some of that is the personal journey that Hunter and I were on in terms of just trying to help one another. And also, I think, we didn't ever necessarily have a desire to be a part of like a huge corporate conglomerate of an agency, right? And we've had those opportunities. I'm sure, like a lot of people, there's different avenues and there's no right or wrong. I think for us, we always looked at it as, I don't know that we knew much of anything, or still may not, other than we had a real clear idea of what we thought it should be and what we thought we should do and how we should do it. And we were very convicted and committed to the idea that if we could do it this way, we thought it would be a real difference maker in the lives of the players. And if it couldn't work that way, then maybe we shouldn't do it at all. Right. And it wasn't just we had to live to be agents, basically. And so a big part of that was in helping players try to maximize who they were as players and therefore their value. And I think, and certainly there are a multitude of different ways to go about that. And there are great, training resources and development resources and skill specific resources and skill specific coaches across the world and across the country. And we access a lot of that. And so it's not like we look at it as our way or only way, but we also were very invested in data and technology is a huge component of where all games have gone to, all professional games have gone to, professional sports, but then certainly in baseball, that's a huge trend. And so, what we looked at was one, a lot of first off, kind of the greater Southeast region, right, is certainly a hotbed for talent. And so, whether people were from the West Coast or whether they're from, Florida, New York, or anywhere in between, kind of in our backyard, for lack of a better term, was, whatever, you go in a certain circumference around our backyard, and there was a lot of talent there. And so naturally, as those athletes are out in their professional, space or in the amateur space, et cetera, Nashville is somewhere that is very attractive, and certainly, as we've seen over the last several years, it's as attractive as any place in the world, really, for people to want to be. So I always say it's not like we were recruiting them to come somewhere that nobody wanted to be. We had that going for us on so many levels that we had no control over, other than it's a great place to live and be, especially in an off season. Then secondarily to that was that you look in terms of the professional sports world, and a lot of players have chosen to make this their home also because there's some intrinsic value, right? No state income tax, low cost of living, whatever it is that would also be attractive. Then more importantly, maybe than anything, was if you're going to hold yourself out as being able to do that, you need to be really good at it, right? Because if you're not good at that, then nobody's going to want to buy in. We were fortunate that we felt like we were pretty good at it. We started building kind of a proof of concept with several of our young players. Justin Smoke was a longtime client, right? That we had a very large hand in that journey for him professionally from the time he was in high school on into a major league all-star and a decade plus in the big leagues. And so then it was also about building out. Really, for us, if we didn't want to be part of the large corporations that are representing players, we better have a really good niche as to what separated us from everybody else, and then have a strong identity in that. And that way, it really has become and is now where if you want what we are, and we want you to be a part of what we are, and that's a two-pronged side of it, it doesn't really exist anywhere else, right? So you have to decide if you want that. We certainly also are a part of that in terms of reciprocally in the culture we've built and the client base we've built. But if you're looking for not only the physical resources, but more importantly, the intellectual resources and the system and plan and that we've put in place of how you would impact the player, that is very different than any other agency that exists because it's just not a typical agency model. And so really it just becomes whether or not players want that or they don't. And to some degree, I think all players want it, but maybe more players are inclined to it in certain ways than others. And so then it's just finding that mutual fit. So that's really the reason that we created it the way we did.
And it's extremely interesting with the idea of that what you guys are doing, because you have named, some guys that you guys have represented. But I know that the best interest for you guys is always going to be making sure that the player is developing the way that they should. If there is say a high school player, say, some kid at Oakland or Ravenwood or someone that thinks they can go to the major leagues and they're pursuing this path, what type of networks do you guys use if somebody were to come to you and be like, hey, do you believe the best avenue for my son is to either enter the draft or to take, 1 or 3 years in college and go that path?
Right. Yeah, I would tell you, because I think the large majority should go to school. Right. One, like Hunter and I are very educated people. Like we give a lot of credit to whatever level of success we have or will continue to have. Our mom was a teacher for 35 years. My brother's Vanderbilt educated. Obviously, I have a law degree and as well as undergraduate. And so we know the value of the college experience. We know the value of college education. And I think the majority of players, and I think professional teams would agree with this too, is going directly out of high school, there's a certain level of maturity beyond skill set, like intellectually, socially, emotionally, those type of things that, a lot of 17, 18-year-olds may or may not be ready for. And so, you have to really be, the monetary component of it is one piece, but then there's also what is the goal, right? Because I always say, like, the minor leagues, for instance, and just playing in the minor leagues or just getting drafted, that is a goal, but that shouldn't be the goal, right? The goal should be I'm pursuing this because I'm trying to get to the major leagues and I'm trying to have a long-term sustainable major league career where I've made a career out of it, where hopefully if this goes the way I want it to, then ultimately I can step back and I can say, like, I can do anything I want after that because I've achieved those things within that career. Because it's a small window of time. Even if it goes the best it can go, you might be 40 years old and at the latest and still have a long life ahead of you post playing. So how do you maximize that short window of time to achieve what you want? And I think if you look statistically, it bears out that the 4-year school route does produce a lot of major leaguers compared to the high school side, but there are always opportunities also where going directly out of high school, may make sense in certain situations. So if I'm a player in a family, I'm also looking at it to say, okay, like, where is my opportunity to develop? Where is and development just isn't, well, how do I throw harder? Or how do I get stronger? Or how do I throw a better breaking ball? Or how do I run faster? It's how am I going to learn to kind of exist in an environment where I have to be really self-sufficient, right? I have to be my own best coach. That might be professionally, that might be collegiately, but what is going to give me the best foundation to be able to achieve a career at the professional level and more importantly at the major league level. And I think when we are talking to family, i.e. the kid at Ravenwood High School or a kid anywhere else that you mentioned, I think it's trying to build an understanding of who they are, what's important to them, where they are, what their upside is, what that maybe their upside isn't, and then ultimately what is going to carve out the best opportunity for you to maximize that to become the best version of yourself. And that's not a one size fit all. And that's a whole other podcast conversation about the things that you would drill down to talk about. But I think that's where being informed with people that have a real understanding and experience level of like how it works, and that this isn't just, maybe it's a bad analogy. I always look at like the draft, for instance. It's just really it's kind of a foundation of the house, but it's not the house. But if the foundation isn't laid right, certainly the house may not ever withstand. But what you make of the building of the house and the making of the home is far more important than just the draft, right? And so sometimes I think within our world and within just the professional game or just the game of baseball, the sport of baseball, sometimes we can get fixated on like that specific moment versus kind of going back to that patience piece of it is understanding what the journey and the career arc is to have a true major league career and what goes into that. And kind of, for lack of a better term, are you ready to buckle up and really embrace that? Because that's a whole different conversation.
Right. And you've got your two different types of pitchers. Like, for instance, a Hunter Green, who was drafted out of high school. He was one of the top picks in the draft, and he's now in the major leagues after going through that minor league system. And then a guy I know that you represent, Casey Mize, did go the college route, did get into the minor league system, and is also already in the major leagues. But I know that when it comes to being an agent, you're there for everything. Obviously, you're making sure and you're checking on the family and all this other stuff. But I'm always interested, especially because of where we're standing right now, the minor league side of it. For you and your guys, how much is this when it comes to therapy of your guy calling you and he's frustrated? Like Brandon Lau, for instance, he spent multiple seasons in Double-A, and you're just like, man, when am I going to get that call up? Because I've got 4 and 5 guys that are ahead of me on the depth chart right now, and they call you at 11 o'clock at night upset because they go 0 for 3 and they walk once.
Yeah, great question, great points. I always laugh. I think if I'd have known what I would have done for a living, I'd have majored in psychiatry or something like that, psychology versus economics or the law. But no, I think that is I think that's the other side of this that is a very interesting part of what we do, and there's really pluses to that and there's the minuses to that too, right? This is not a 9 to 5 thing. It's a 7 days a week, 24/7. You have to be prepared to get a call at 12:30 in the morning from a client that has just given up 6 runs in a half of first half of the top half of the first inning, and or somebody who's on an 0 for 20 stretch or whatever, and just sometimes just being a sounding board or being kind of a voice of reason or voice of comfort, and then there's other times too where exactly what you're saying. It's, hey, like I've been in AAA, I've been in Double-A and doing really well here for the last year, but I haven't broken through to the big leagues. What is that? And sometimes that's conversations with front offices and farm directors and so on and so forth to say, hey, where does this guy fit and what does he need to do better? Sometimes that's just talking to the player and helping them understand that there are certain things within their control, and then there's other things that maybe that club is in a win now mode. And so, they have a, terrific starting rotation and you're just blocked, not by no fault of your own, but that those things tend to work themselves out if you just keep being good. Right. And so I think there's a multitude of things, but I think that is probably the biggest piece of what we do. Right. It's like when you boil this down, like you build up a lot of momentum over time and over years even to capture small windows of like contractual opportunities, for instance, whether it's free agency or arbitration or the draft. But then there's a whole bunch of time in between those moments. And that's where the element you're talking about from an agency standpoint is really what advocacy is, right? And advocacy isn't always just, somehow I'm going to go dictate to somebody what they should do. Like we're never going to go dictate to a team how they should handle a player, right? That's a misnomer sometimes that people don't realize. But sometimes advocacy is being able to be honest and having the relationship with your client where sometimes they need to hear something versus what they want to hear. And other times they may be full on in the right of what it is that they're pursuing and how they're going about it. And then you have to advocate on their behalf to their club or, to whatever situation you're doing to try to advance their cause. And, and so I think, a lot of that is just the nuance of where they are in their moment and then being there, as somebody that understands what that is and then ultimately trying to give guidance and counsel on how to get them through whatever they're going through.
We only have a few more moments with Dustin Bledsoe of the Bledsoe Agency. And do you ever find it a little bit more difficult to get in contact with some of your clients on July 31st?
You talking about the trade deadline?
The trade deadline, yeah. Is that, oh no, he's calling me. Is he calling me to check in or is he calling me because I need to pack my stuff?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen it, I guess, a little bit of everything, right? Sometimes it's hard to sometimes I might be the first call from the organization because the organization can't get a hold of them. And other times I'm getting a call from them, to tell me, hey, I just got a call from my GM or whatever to say I'm leaving. And, and other times it may be nothing going on, even if there's a million, rumors swirling around, et cetera, and they just got to hold tight. And, it's really, that's one of the interesting parts of what we do, right? And what players experience is that, unlike most professions, you can be one place and the very next night expected not only be, somewhere else, but be employed by somebody totally different. And that's not usually what most of us experience out in the professional world, right? You don't usually walk in and your boss say, hey, we love you, but, you're going to work for our competitor, 3,000 miles away. But that's part of it.
Well, I love that you said something like that about how you can be in one place at one time and then be across the country the other way, is because I will always remember Jose Cruz Jr. when he was playing for the Seattle Mariners. In fact, I believe Ken Griffey Jr. was up to bat. Jose Cruz Jr. was on deck. Jr. gets a hit, and they literally that very second pulled him back into the dugout and got a pinch hitter because he'd been traded while he was on deck for, from the Mariners to somebody else. And I mean, it can't happen just that quickly. We talked to Adam English last week, and he says he's seen pitchers that were going into the game, got through about 2/3 of an inning and get pulled because they had just gotten traded in that. And before, look, I would love to have you on again because of everything that we're talking. Look, we got a ton that we can talk to, especially when it comes to agencies.
Appreciate it.
Before we let you go, you talked about Brandon Lau. You've talked about Casey Mize. I know you represent a bunch of guys, but you also have gone through those journeys and you have taken those calls when they're stuck in single A or double A, and you have been around the family and the kids and everything else. What was the most memorable moment for you finally seeing a player run out onto a major league field for the first time?
Oh, man, I don't know that there's one. I think sometimes in life, you make your own luck, but you also have to catch some luck too. And I would tell you that maybe, arguably one of the coolest things that we've ever experienced. Our very first client is a player named Tony Sipp, who played over 10 years in the big leagues, a large stint with the Houston Astros and Cleveland and several others. And he played at Clemson many moons ago, and I went there for undergraduate, and a mutual relationship connected us. But that was a pretty special one because, now the draft has been short. Lots of things are different today than they were, in the early 2000s when we started. But he was a 45th rounder. Obviously there's not even, but 20 rounds now. So that player doesn't even have a chance to get his opportunity, let alone go in the 45th round and end up being a 10 plus year major league, veteran who, won a World Series, et cetera. And so he actually got hurt in the minor leagues, had to have Tommy John. He was almost on the verge of making his debut, gets hurt. That backs him up another, 12 to 18 months. And then he ends up making it. And then the journey to take him, from the draft at a point in 45th round, making his debut, gets to arbitration, gets to free agency, was very fortunate to do very well economically as well. And to be a part of that from the moment he was entering the draft until, fast forward, 15 plus years later, basically, and still be a part of it, will probably always be one of, if not the most memorable pieces to whatever we do, because there was a certain element of, I have no idea what we were selling him to make him interested in us. And I don't know that, I think he would be honest and say, I don't know really what made y'all interested in me, but to kind of grow up together through the process, and then to watch all the things and to kind of cut teeth with each other in different ways, whether it was contract negotiations or whether it was helping them through injuries or tough times or whatever. Pretty cool stuff. So.
Well, and that's real awesome. And Dustin, I appreciate you hopping on with us. I also appreciate you staying on as long as you did with us, and me not making one single Jerry Maguire reference. And I'm really impressed with myself for not doing that. So
that's right. Appreciate you not doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. I had to make sure of we're not doing this. This is going to be something totally different. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, appreciate you guys as well, and thanks for having me and for your questions. And obviously, best of luck going forward. Appreciate all you do.
Thank you, man. We really appreciate Dustin Bledsoe stopping in and talking with us for as long as we did. Again, he talked about it. He's basically working 24/7, 365. He's going to get a phone call at 1 a.m. He may get a phone call at 2 a.m. One of his guys that's over on the West Coast may have just given up 6 runs in a half inning, and he's having a breakdown. He's got to talk to him. It's really cool to kind of see how the agent process works. And we deeply appreciate it. There's tons more stuff that I would love to talk to with Dustin about. We're going to try to get him back on later on in the season. So I just really appreciate him stopping by and talking to us on the Strike Zone. If you happen to miss any of that, go follow us on whatever form that you get your podcast, and make sure that you give us a follow, because once the show is over with tonight, we throw that thing up on the streams for all of our podcasting streams. You'll get that sent directly to your phone, directly to your computer, wherever it is you listen to your podcast, and you can listen to it tomorrow driving to work or wherever it is. So we really appreciate Dustin hopping in. Now, I've told you throughout and at the beginning of the show to start getting some of those Twitter questions in, some of those chat questions in that we have that's going to kind of help us and talk a little bit about some things that are going on baseball wise throughout Major League Baseball, minor league baseball, and even the SEC. And in fact, Freddie shot one over on Twitter just a few seconds ago. He said, should we be worried about the Vols losing 3 of their last 6 SEC games? And look, every single baseball team is going to go through a period of time where they're going to have some lulls. Okay. This Tennessee team is legit in every form and fashion. And if it somehow, in some way, if Ben Joyce is available to pitch for you, it is pretty much ball game. Okay. I know some players have been able to get some contact on him. And I think that Ben Joyce is the secret weapon for Tennessee to make it to the College World Series. I don't want to say win the College World Series just yet, because I want to see how he would potentially be utilized in Omaha when it talks to him, because you can go back to the Auburn series a couple of weekends ago, and you had a tie ball game that between Auburn and Tennessee. It was the rubber game of the series. It was on Sunday. Ben Joyce comes in and throws like 4 to 5 innings. Auburn doesn't touch the ball. I mean, they barely even make contact with the ball for those 4 to 5 innings. And it's all because of the fact that, yes, He throws 104 miles per hour. I get that he throws 104, but then he breaks off some of that breaking ball, and that's coming in at 84 and 85. And the thing about a slider that you can team up so well with a fastball is the fact that when you throw it, you have the exact same arm motion. You have almost the exact same release in some, for instances. And what happens is the ball comes out of his hands and it looks just like it is your normal fastball. So that's the reason why you're going to see pitchers, or specifically see Ben Joyce, throw that pitch sometimes in an 0-2 count, sometimes in a 2-2 count, something like that, where they need to get the batter off in front of it, because any batter that's coming into the batter's box is going to be facing Ben Joyce. That is going to be the thought process of, I'm sitting on fastball because I'm not touching the slider, because it's going to be so bad and it's going to not necessarily break so much, but the speed differential is going to be so different that I've got to choose one or the other. He doesn't throw the slider enough for me to just come up there and sit on slider. I'm going to have to focus on fastball. That's the reason why you're starting to see a lot of that, and you are going to see that as we continue to go through. The other aspect of this is the key to Tennessee is going to be not being in an elimination game scenario, whether it is losing a game early in the regional round, early in the SEC tournament, depending on what part of the SEC tournament that they get into. I've actually, let me back that up. Tennessee is going to be a seed that's going to skip the first day, so they don't even have to worry about that. But there are double elimination parts to it until you get to the championship game, where it's a best of one series. So you don't want to be in an elimination game scenario with Tennessee where you're going to have to use Ben Joyce, say, on a Thursday or on a Friday, and still need him for the weekend, because if he's going to be throwing 4 to 5 innings, it's not going to be good for the team. And if he's going to throw 4 or 5 innings on a Friday, he's not going to be available on Saturday or Sunday, especially when you get into that SEC championship and the SEC tournament that's going to be coming up in Hoover. If he's having to throw on that day and they don't get that scenario where they get to rest him and kind of be smart with where they're throwing him at, he may not even be available for the SEC championship game. And then Tennessee's not going to have that guy in the back end of their bullpen. So utilizing Ben Joyce and seeing the way that Coach Vitello could potentially use him throughout the tournament, the SEC tournament, regionals, and even super regionals before you can even get to Omaha, he is going to be the X factor, because there's not a single player in baseball that can catch up to that pitch significantly enough to make a difference in a baseball game, unless they just get lucky. And I mean, that does happen. Okay. I mean, these batters are facing 95 to 98 now, and it's on average now. And if they're seeing that, they can time it up properly. They get lucky. And yes, they're going to be able to send it, because all you've got to do, like it's, easy. All you've got to do is just square up the baseball. If you square up the baseball with a BB Core bat, that ball is going into orbit. Okay. If it has the right exit velocity, that sucker is gone. If it doesn't have the right exit velocity, then it's going to hit you and leave a 2-foot hole coming out. I mean, that's what you're talking about. So it's going to be a scenario that using Ben Joyce is going to be kind of the key to the Vols making this deep run in the playoffs. And so I really appreciate that question coming in from Freddie. Let me get to the next question that we have coming in right now. You can do it on the Strike Zone. Make sure that you follow us on Twitter at Joe Hunk, as well as at 1045 The Zone, and every other possible platform that you possibly can. Ben shoots us a message, and it's about Nestor Cortez. If you don't know who Nestor Cortez is, he is the starting pitcher for the New York Yankees. All right. Yankees have one of the best records in baseball right now, and they're doing something that is kind of strange, because Nestor was not a starting pitcher for this Yankees franchise 3 and 4 years ago. He just became a starting pitcher back in July of 2021. He was coming out of the bullpen a lot. The problem with this, and the question that Ben asked was, will Nestor Cortez win the Cy Young? He's got to get some dubs, man. If you know, and I'm saying that kind of in a joking way, but Nestor Cortez has already started 6 games this season. You know what his record is? 1-1. He has 4 no decisions. He goes to about the 5th or 6th inning, and then what happens is either the Yankees bullpen cannot finish the game off, or he gets pulled when it's a tie ball game. But he's only got 2 decisions so far this season. His ERA is absolutely fantastic, 1.41. He's averaging almost 12 strikeouts in 9 innings. Problem is he's only going about 5 or 6 innings. So now you've got at least 2 or 3 relievers that you kind of have to rely on to help that win-loss record. His whip, it's below 1, which is obviously where you do want it. You want a sub 1 whip. If you don't know what whip is, it's walks plus hits per inning. So when I say it's sub 1, that means that he's giving up less than 1 hit or walk every single inning. So that's kind of the definition of whip. There's a lot of sabermetric stuff that Major League Baseball is utilizing now. That's why whenever you sometimes see a guy come up to the plate, you see now OPS or you see slugging percentage or something along those lines. You just don't see batting average anymore. It's because those are more of a data point, a stat that people believe is more fair to what the player is actually doing on the field than just batting average or something along those lines. Batting average is going to come up here in just a little bit, but Cortez at the moment is number 3 in the American League in ERA. Michael Kopech from the Chicago White Sox is number 1 in ERA right now in the American League. Combined, those 2 pitchers have started 12 games so far this season. Their combined record, 1-1. Kopech does not have a decision. He is 0 for 0, and he has started 6 games for the White Sox so far. They continue to blow leads after he gets taken out. Look, Michael Kopech is eventually going to become a closer. That is his eventual life. You can't throw as hard as he does and not be throwing it for more than 1 to 2 innings per ball game. You just can't. Okay. I know he's already had elbow problems. Again, we were just talking about Ben Joyce. The human elbow and the human shoulder were never truly meant to be throwing a baseball 104 miles per hour. Okay. It just wasn't meant to be like that. So to see these pitchers doing what they're doing and the velocity in which they are throwing, you're going to have elbow issues. You're going to have shoulder issues. You're not going to have a long baseball career if you don't take care of that arm. Michael Kopech started out in the minor leagues as a closer, as a relief pitcher, and they eventually moved him into the starting position because he wanted to be that. He's taken a little velocity off of the fastball just so they can go longer. But at the exact same time, his biggest benefit in baseball and where his longevity is eventually going to become is going to be as a closer. He's going to be that next Josh Hader. Like he's going to be that guy. Okay. Cortez is kind of going the opposite route. He started as a reliever in the major leagues, and then he became a starter for the Yankees out of necessity, and he's been pitching fantastic so far. This is still his best season. Okay. But the problem with it when it comes to a pitcher like Cortez, you do know now, and we've seen it, win-loss record is not going to affect you when it does come to Cy Young. Whip is going to affect you. Batting average is going to affect you. I mean, you're talking about your slugging percentages and all that. You know, those are the things that are actually going to affect you when it comes to looking at the Cy Young, because now, especially with somebody like a Jacob deGrom that we've seen be able to win the Cy Young with not having a great win-loss record, people that are voting on the Cy Young now have changed the way that they look, and they look at the actual individual stats of what they're doing. Jacob deGrom cannot help if he gives up 1 run in 8 innings, but then he comes in and his team can't even score a run for him and they lose 1-0. Like he just can't help that. Okay. Or he can't help if he pitches great for 8 innings and then his closer comes in and Edwin Diaz doesn't have the ability to close it out and the team scores 4 runs in the top of the 9th inning. That's not his fault. And that's the reason why you're starting to see some of those changes kind of take place here as we continue along. Next question that's coming in right now on the chat comes from Stefan asking, was the signing of Trevor Story the downfall of the Red Sox? Now, the Red Sox are not playing well this year. If you forgot, because it kind of does, you do forget these things over time. Red Sox were playing in the ALCS last year. The Braves could have been playing the Boston Red Sox in the World Series. In fact, the Boston Red Sox had a lead in that series and then blew it. They were in Boston up, and they could have actually, I think, if I remember correctly, closed that out in Boston, and then they just choked away the entire series. but they're not playing well right now. They signed Trevor Story in the offseason. Trevor Story was obviously a shortstop for his entire career with the Colorado Rockies. He leaves Colorado, he goes to Boston, and he agrees to go from playing shortstop over to second base because Xander Bogaerts is at shortstop and is the elder statesman there. And look, he's a better defensive player right now, and Xander Bogaerts is starting to become that next legacy shortstop for the Boston Red Sox. Heck, he may already be there, but he's doing what he's doing. And so Trevor Story makes the swap over to second. And in all honesty, that's really the only change 1 through 9 with this team that you have actually seen when it comes to this Red Sox team. For the most part, you are seeing this team is the exact same. The only difference is they lost Hunter Renfroe. They gained Trevor Story. That's it. Hold on one second. I need to fix something real fast. I know you're asking yourself, where did he just go? What did he just do? Yeah, here's what happened. Okay, I told you, I'm hanging out in the suite here at the stadium at First Horizon Park. If you're in one spot for so long, lights turn off. So I had to go turn the lights back on because I'm the only one in the suite right now. And obviously everybody else is in Jacksonville, and I basically have the whole stadium to myself. Okay. So I was like, hold on, let me turn these lights back on because you need to see me at least. So back to Trevor Story. Okay. Trevor Story has historically never been an April/March hitter. Lifetime, he's batting .240 in March. Lifetime, he's got a .480 slugging percentage. Lifetime, he's got a .794 OPS. All of those are the lowest average in that statistical category for every month in his career. April and March is always his lowest statistical category month throughout the time he's been in Major League Baseball. He also has struck out 190 times in his career in the month of April and March, which is basically considered the first month of the season. Those are the most strikeouts that he has of any month since he's been in Major League Baseball. He's not a very much of an April or March guy. Now there's two sides to every story. So you can look at this of, Denver in April and March is still cold and not like Boston cold. Okay. Not like wind coming off the lake type cold. I mean, you're talking Rocky Mountain cold. Okay. Maybe that affects the baseballs. Then we go back to the humidors and balancing the numbers and everything like we talked about last week. So you have that issue. The bigger problem, though, for the Red Sox is not the April or March that Trevor Story was happening. It's the April or March that the entire team is having. There are only 2 teams in the American League that have hit fewer home runs than the Boston Red Sox so far in 2022. And yes, I understand what happened the other night in Atlanta. I know, okay? I get it, all right? There are 2 starting pitchers right now for the Boston Red Sox that have 5+ ERAs. Bullpen is pitching tremendously. Heck, half of the starting lineup right now, I believe, is batting like under 200. It's not a Trevor Story thing. It's a Boston Red Sox thing. And I understand everybody thought that when Alex Cora came back and he became the manager of the Red Sox again, that they would go back to being the World Series contenders like they were and winning the World Series like they did in 2018. The problem with that thought process has to do with the fact that maybe last year was just an anomaly because except for Trevor Story, your team is the exact same. Maybe these players that you have brought in that did have career seasons last year, maybe last year was the anomaly and this is who this team is. That's where the issues start coming up of making some changes and trying to figure out who the next starting 9 is supposed to be. Because right now, this starting 9 is not playing well together. And you're not going to do anything with Xander Bogaerts. You're not going to do anything with Trevor Story. And for some stupid reason, you brought back Jackie Bradley Jr. Defensively, I get it. Offensively, the guy was horrible in Milwaukee. He was bad towards the end for the Boston Red Sox, but you brought him back because he's a good defensive player and he can play right field, and that's going to be where his position is going to be for majority of the season. The problem is Jackie Bradley had always been a Gold Glove center fielder. He'd always been a Gold Glove outfielder. He was never a Silver Slugger type guy. He just doesn't hit that well, okay? He is just not the player that you're going to be able to do and to help that. So you were hoping that Trevor Story comes in and he were to help this team offensively, where Jackie Bradley Jr. was going to be able to help this team defensively. And look, the thought process could have worked, but no. Jackie Bradley's won one Gold Glove. That was in 2018. He was in the All-Star game in 2016. Other than that, he has not done squat. In fact, the man has barely even batted over 250 for his entire career. He only batted over 280 one time, and that was in 2020, shortened season, and that was the only time that he's even hit that well. Last year for Milwaukee, he batted sub 200. This year right now, batting sub 200. Why you brought him back in, no clue. Because he is not going to benefit the Red Sox whatsoever this season, because that's not who he is. All right, last question before we wrap up. Let's see, there's 3 really good questions that we've gotten on the chat so far. We'll finish with this one, because this is actually not going to be an issue next year. So this is something we need to talk about now, because it's going to go away. The shift. All right, let me double check, make sure that I'm giving the person the right props that asked the question. All right. Judd shot us a message through the chat and says, is the shift the worst thing that's happened to baseball? No, I think the shift is brilliant. In fact, the shift was so brilliant, they were using it decades before it became popular now. They were using it 50, 60 years ago. There are pictures of Major League Baseball players in the 20s and 30s using the shift on particular batters. So it's been around for decades. Joe Madden, the Tampa Bay Rays, they're the ones that really made it popular. And then other teams started going at it once they saw the success of this. Remember, it's the exact same thing like you've seen with the opener in times. The opener has been successful. It helps teams out, and boom, you're good to go. But the whole concept of the shift being horrible is not really something that you can look at, because there are other things that are the worst thing in baseball history. Like putting a team in St. Petersburg was one of the worst decisions in baseball history. They've never had good crowds, ever. This right here, what you're seeing behind me, that is a Tampa Bay Rays crowd on a Saturday night. That's what it is. There's a reason people continue to want to talk about them coming to Nashville. Allowing the DH in one league and doing it for like 40 years or 50 years. Dumb. What's the soundbite we use on 3HL? That is so dumb. That's what it is. Promising every single Major League Baseball team that they can have an all-star? Dumb. Pittsburgh Pirates, outside of one, Brian Reynolds, he will always be their all-star when he's there, because he's just that good, and he really needs to go to another team. I'll tell you why in just a second. But Pirates don't deserve an all-star, okay? For a long time, the Tigers didn't deserve an all-star. The Royals didn't deserve an all-star, okay? The Marlins, for a period of time, didn't deserve an all-star. There are teams that do not deserve all-stars, and there are teams that deserve multiple all-stars. And I will finish it with this decision that is worse than the shift. This was almost like a David Letterman countdown. The Bermuda shorts that the Chicago White Sox wore, those are worse than the shift. Now we're wrapping up tonight. We're going to do this a little bit differently. There's something I always wanted to do when it comes to doing the strike zone, specifically here in Central Tennessee, is I want to focus and I want to highlight a player from the state of Tennessee that is doing well, whether it's the minor leagues, whether it's the major leagues, something along those lines. All right. And I did narrow it down to 2. I may be a little bit biased because of what is happening next Wednesday night. I told you about it at the very beginning. Mookie Betts, Scherzer giveaway from Overton. That made him our Tennessee player of the week. Okay. Over his last 7 games, batted .300, got 9 hits, 2 home runs, 7 RBIs. Yes, I hate the Dodgers, but Mookie is legit. The guy that was second, this is the reason why I said that he needs to get off the team. Brian Reynolds needs to go somewhere else, okay? Because he batted .333 this past week. He had 9 hits this week. He had 2 home runs. So he hit better than Mookie when it comes to batting average is concerned, had the same number of hits, same number of home runs. Mookie Betts had 7 RBIs over the last week. Brian Reynolds, 2. He had 2 home runs, and those were his RBIs. The Pirates are horrible. Make sure you join us next week. The Strike Zone will be back out here at First Horizon Park. It's going to be a throwback Thursday, 1978 uniforms. Make sure that you're watching. Make sure that you're following us. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, all of those. Pause. That's where Don says, Twitch, please. We'll see you next week.